Hello and welcome back to Privilege Check, a podcast where two girls from different backgrounds come together to unveil the reality of modern society. I'm Loveleen.
And I'm Shivangi. Through this podcast, we want to reach out to the privileged
You already know you are because you have access to this podcast.
and teach them the 101s of how to not be a privileged pig.
In this episode of the Unscripted segment, we are in collaboration with Veg and Non Veg podcast, and let's see what all of that is about. I would like you to introduce you and your podcast and how it started now.
Should I answer this? Okay. So we are called Veg and Non Veg podcast. So this was an idea that we came up with long back that we should do a podcast, but in short, we never got around to it until the pandemic struck and we were stuck at home doing nothing. So we thought about it and decided to do a podcast about what we know the best, which is Indian students living abroad and especially in the US. So we were thinking about, we brainstormed a lot, we came up with a lot of episode ideas, and we thought we had something here, and we were thinking of what to name it. And so we were looking at Indianisms. Okay, so words that Indians use in English, but they're not, very common outside. So one of them is like veg and non-veg restaurants, and non-veg is a word that is only used in India or like South Asian communities. Um, so yeah, that's where we were just brainstorming a few ideas, and this domain happened to be available at that time, veganddnonveg.com. So I just went ahead and bought it, and that's how it began. That's how we started. So far, we have like I think 35 odd episodes, and yeah, that's we're reaching almost a year since we started. So it's been a good. I mean, obviously since the pandemic started, it's been a year. So yeah, we are reaching a year of our podcast. So yeah,
Right.
thanks for having us.
Yeah, that actually makes us twins because we also started during the pandemic and we had the same experience. Also, I realized that we use kind of like the same everything. Like we use Zoom, we use Audacity, and we use Anchor as well. Just crazy because literally the same resources. But
No,
yeah, so that was go ahead, Levine. What?
I
We
think the
keep
only
talking over
difference
each
is,
other, so
yeah, we talk over each other a lot.
That's fine.
We
Yeah, but
just edit that
yeah,
part out.
yeah, actually we do that. So it's become very easy to start your own podcast with like zero investment. Yeah, we've said this before. Anchor is free to host, Audacity is free, open source, you
yeah,
can edit
yeah,
files, and Zoom is free for just two people. So
yeah.
we've used all the resources, and I'm sure you also did the same research and came up with the same answers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Anything that saves us money, we're in for it.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Our key research purpose is where do we get and what do we get for free. I think the only difference is that you guys actually invested in a domain. We didn't. Like, we're not
Yeah.
going to do that.
Mhm.
We're not.
It,
Yeah.
it cost like what, $10 or something, so not
Uh,
much.
we wouldn't.
Yeah. We would probably never go to sleep if we spent money. So we just, yeah. Well, I don't think we can even rationalize our thinking. There's like literally no logical basis. That's just how it is.
There's no way to explain ourselves. There's no way that we can explain why we are the way we are. So we've stopped attempting to rationalize all of that. Our last guest as well
Yeah.
suggested we actually invest in mics, and we straight up refused it there and there on his face. So that's that. Anyway,
They
I
said I
think we should.
started selling it as well. Remember, like it's for 30 rupees, it's for 100, you can afford it. And I'm like, it's not about not affording, it's just I don't want to spend. So they were just so confused about this entire mentality we have.
Yep,
Yep.
You ask for
that's
gifts.
enough.
Yeah.
If you like our podcast, gift us a mic, something like that.
Oh, we've done that, but the thing is, nobody likes our podcast and nobody really listens to us. So, I mean,
That's not a very great marketing thing.
Yeah.
oh, So that has been a marketing tool from A1, just emotionally blackmail people into listening the podcast. See,
Yeah.
like you're not supporting us and all of that, and we just
Yeah.
did that at the start, and then we just gave up.
Yeah. I think we both agree that I have the more aggressive marketing strategy.
Yeah.
It's just
My
promoting
God, I
myself
just.
everywhere. It's just all
So
in
she
the
like
face.
put on this Zoom background in meets, like in meet calls that are not even related to a podcast. She just put it up just to promote it, and it's just so weird.
Yeah. But at least
That's
everybody
a good
likes it.
strategy.
Yeah.
That's a
Thank
good
you.
strategy to have, like
Thank
put it
you.
in everybody's faces is
Yeah, it's called
obviously
Yeah.
being. Yep.
At least like let's just pretend everybody cares about it till everybody starts caring about it.
Yeah,
Somebody might.
amazing.
Somebody just might.
Great coping
fake it till
mechanism
you
that we.
make it, basically.
Yep.
Right. I just tried to say it in a better, not sounding that way. But yeah, that's essentially the idea behind it. Fake it till you make it.
Yep.
Anyway, let's just dig into that's enough bashing ourselves or blatant promotion for the beginning of the episode. We have an entire week for it. So let's just dig into the episode. Shivangi, do you want to pull up the first questions that we have for our guest?
Yeah. So the first question I wanted to ask, and this is something Laveen and I are both really interested in understanding, because there's a lot of talk about how what kind of discrimination Indians face abroad, right? And even though you all have lived there for a short while, it's been an eventful duration, obviously. So there are these entire anecdotes about how sometimes there's racial stereotyping when, like, let's say you go back to India, there are some kids whose professors ask them whether they'll get married and all of that crap because they think that, like child marriage. So the students are barely teens and the teachers are insinuating all of these things. Then there's this entire internet culture of curry memes and jokes and going back to India if you don't like how a particular thing is being appreciated in like abroad. And so does like all of these things that people talk about have a deep impact on your mental health, like other students like you, or do you just really get so used to it that doesn't affect you?
Do you want to start? I have some thoughts, but you can start first.
You can go ahead. I'm still like understanding the full question.
Okay. Should I just
Okay.
repeat it again?
No, no.
You're fine. You're fine. I'll just pick it up.
Yeah, yeah. Please do. A lot of okay. It's fine. I got it. I'll try to answer it the best I can. So there were a lot of parts to your question. First was that, do you face any discrimination? And also about, you mentioned a few things like how people talk to you and mention racial stereotypes or something like that. So again, we live in a very conservative town, and it's a small college town, largely white. So, but still, there's always a community of people that you can find, especially, Indians are in large numbers everywhere. So we've been usually surrounded by Indians, so it's not been like, overtly discriminating. There are levels to, how the discrimination comes across. So there could be, the levels that, let's say, African Americans face in terms of police brutality, or in a lot of ways, like, housing discrimination, where they are not given the same houses and stuff like that. And then there are subtle biases that come into picture, like, say for example, one time I applied for a job with my name, and I got rejected, and so I applied with a different name, a westernized name, and for the same job, the same resume, and I got a call for an interview. But that's, I can't necessarily say it was discrimination, but there is a good chance it was, because it's the same job, uh, or the recruiter just didn't do a very good job. I want to give them a benefit of the doubt, but it's kind of difficult. There was a study done by some people long back on, white names versus like common black names, and even when the black resumes were much better suited for the job, the white people got more interview calls. So those are biases that people have. It's very difficult to just suddenly eliminate those. But again, these are the major ones. There are like smaller, what you call microaggressions, that don't really bother me, but they might bother a lot of people, because it's like when you talk to someone, I don't really expect them to know a lot about my culture. Their exposure to the culture might be very limited. So it might sound like a microaggression. Like, for example, um, they ask if there is uh, a lot of times, do people speak English, or how do you speak English so well? That is a very common question that we get, and that is because they don't really know about Indian history and how
Yeah.
India was a colony for like 200 years. And English is an official language in India, and there are probably more English speakers than in India than in England.
Yeah.
So uh, those things are just ignorance, rather than, I would say, uh, outright racism, so to speak. So there are different levels, and it can bother some people. There's also very uh, lame things, like when things don't translate very well, people tend to get offended. Like, for example, saying naan bread or something, chai tea or something. Those are not
Yes.
those are not things that really bother me, because it's just, as long as you understand what the other person is saying, I don't mind it. But it does offend some people. So right now we are um, fortunate that we've not faced any overt
Yeah.
discrimination that we can speak of. And there isn't, also a lot of people do a very good job of hiding it. Here there is this idea that you shouldn't say anything to someone's face, and they'll always be polite to your face. But what they say in their uh, you know in their houses, or what they say when the minority crowd is not present, that's the real them. So yeah, you don't always get to see it, but it's there.
Yeah, I'd like to add a few things to this. Like he said, we currently live in Texas, and we've been here since our grad school is in Texas. So we've lived here for over like 4 years now. Even though it was a conservative town, I think they were still open to it. But yeah, there were microaggressions, and I would say more funny ones were like, when they get to know that you're Indian, they would be like, "Oh, I love curry," or "I love vindaloo," and I'm like, "Okay, what's that got to do with me? Like, I'm not gonna make it for you." But that's what they always come up with, try to relate with you in basis of food. Or they would try to ask you, like, I mean, since it was a conservative and a religious town, they would try to ask you more about your religion and if you were a Hindu or what that means. But they always had those underlying tones where they either wanted to convert you or preach about Christianity and all those different things, which I don't think it bothers us as much, but I can say that it would bother a lot more religious people. And I am that person who gets offended, not offended, but like annoyed by when people say it's naan bread or chai tea. The only thing is, it's so simple to learn the basic words. Like, you can say a lot of different things, right? Like a lot of more
Exactly.
complicated European or German words. But you can't like try to understand, just say naan. You can say the word, you just don't have to put a subtitle to it. That's my whole issue. I'll just go and correct people just for the sake of it, because it makes me happy rather than me being offended at this point. But yeah, like racism wise, I don't think I've gotten any like outright racism. Um, like I got like a racist comment on the other side where someone thought I was Hispanic, and they would try to like say hola. This was a very white person, so they did not make the effort to know if I was Indian or not, or what ethnicity I was. So I just like looked at them puzzled, because I don't speak Spanish. I mean, I know what hola is, but I don't know anything else. And that happened a couple times. So I was like, okay, at least find the right race to be racist against. So But yeah, I think we are still a lot more privileged than a lot of other ethnicities which face a lot outright racism.
I wanted to add
I
about
love
Christianity.
Juhi's energy. Yeah, sure, go
So
ahead.
yeah, I wanted to add about Christianity. There was this one time, this guy tried to, we were in this place. Um, it's a church, okay. So they give out a lot of free food. So I was there,
Of
and
course.
yeah, bro, college students, we do that a lot.
Yeah.
So there was this elderly man who came and sat next to me, and he's like, "Have you read the Bible? Do you want a Bible?" And I was like, "No, I'm not Christian." And I was like, "Yo, we might have a Bible in your language." And I was like, "My language is English, so
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you have a Bible in my language." Uh, I mean, he wasn't offended. He was like, "Yeah, sure, you can get one," but I didn't. Obviously, I'm like, I don't know. They always want to know, like, are you Hindu? It's very difficult to explain to them that I'm not religious, and they are always trying to compare. And they're like, are there Christians in India? And how do I explain that there are more Christians in India than in Texas?
Yeah.
So
So
And
funny you mentioned about this church and Christian thing because turns out it happens to me as well, and I live in India. So
yeah.
my school used to be a Catholic school, right? And they outright tried to convert me by whispering all of these verses in my ear and saying that Jesus has a place for you and all of that. And like outright in 10th grade, they were trying to convert me. And I just didn't even care about religion back then, but they were just trying to convert me real bad. So great, we have something in common then, surprisingly.
I mean, I don't know, I just find all of this so funny for some reason. It's, because Shivangi keeps telling me about all the. Shivangi actually tells this incident about verses being whispered into her ear every chance she gets. So this
Of
was just
course.
a moment for her to shine once again. But really, I I noticed you say something about racism be not being racism per se, but being ignorant, more of ignorance. But wouldn't you say that, I mean, this is just something I thought of, and maybe you would agree or not, and you could tell me that. But wouldn't you say that all sorts of racism actually uh, would have its roots somewhere in ignorance? So I would personally believe that it is because of this ignorance that people don't understand where the other person is coming from, or because they have this single-minded perspective of what a person could be and what the majority, because that's what the majority is like. And okay, we can give them the benefit of doubt of not having the knowledge, but I think in this day and age, um, with the sort of media that we consume and with the sort of privilege we have to consume that media, that maybe there should be some sort of effort to understand where the other person is coming from, right? What do you have to say about that?
yeah, I mentioned that. So what I wanted to say is that, uh, racism is a very loaded word. Okay, so I would first attribute someone's words to, ignorance or lack of knowledge rather than to, malice. So
Mhm.
racism comes with a lot of negative connotations. Ignorance is just, someone failing to educate themselves. Yeah, they have all the knowledge at their fingertips. There is no excuse to be ignorant, but they also don't have any excuse to learn about your culture until, they probably met you. So
Hmm.
uh, I don't. So depending on what um the level of racism or discrimination we face, I don't want to say racism because again, it's a loaded word. So depending on what the interaction is, if it's just something like, someone not understanding words in your culture, that is not a big deal. But if someone tries to justify something like police brutality, that
Hmm.
comes, they have no reason to be ignorant about that. That is straight up racism.
Hmm. That makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. I really like.
Yeah, it's like part ignorant, but it's like more like
Yeah.
willing ignorance rather than trying like failing to educate themselves, even though they know certain things, it's the idea that they are the superior being, or they are a superior like race, or just because of their color, on the basis of their color. And that's not like, yeah, like he said, like racism is a very loaded word, and I wouldn't say that they are being outright racist. If they learn about our culture, they are, respectful after that. But if even if they know about it and then they still continue to be racist, or like, have these aggressive comments and actions, that's when I would go into racism.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a really nice take, actually. So when you usually listen about or learn about encounters of Indian students abroad, and you usually have all of this, like you mentioned, naan bread and chai tea, and people really get offended by it. And I understand where Juhi is coming from and her energy, because we listen to that in India as well. It's not, I mean, we both live in Mumbai and we listen to that here as well. And here it's a little more annoying because you
Especially
expect people to
dalgona
know.
coffee. Can we just stop talking about how it's fatty hui coffee and people are just, giving it like what word did people in our class use?
Whipped.
Chutneyfication. They're saying
Uh,
this is chutneyfication because they're using dalgona coffee. It's just fatty hui coffee. And I'm just like, let people enjoy, man. Just let them enjoy. What is the big deal?
Yeah, it's
But
like on a very lower level tier of problems that we have to face. It's just
Yeah.
people saying
exactly.
different terms.
yeah.
And it's not really that India owns that dalgona coffee or fetiwi coffee or whatever you like to call it, because there are other cultures who are not Indians who have this and they call it dalgona coffee. So it's just transferable, I think.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, I think, does anybody have any other points to add, or shall we move on?
I'm very okay. I want to talk about food since we are onto it. I am
Amazing.
generally very open about like uh, where food comes from or what is authentic X or what is this. It doesn't matter. It honestly does not matter. Cuisines keep evolving. Things keep coming up. Like India didn't have beans or potatoes or chilies till like the 17th century. Okay. And and now you can't imagine any food without those things. So it's like when people say rajma, they're like, those are imported from
Yeah.
Mexico, or potatoes are from Portugal or whatever.
Hmm.
These are all foreign imports. Indian cuisine would be nothing without them. So saying that this is Indian cuisine, or saying samosa is an Indian dish, it has Persian origins or whatever. So things keep coming from anywhere and they move. Also about languages. So I don't mind using Indian English anywhere. Uh, it's perfectly fine. So you can say revert back or whatever, or prepone, things that do not are non-veg, if you want to, because those things. I mean, there are more. There are more Indian English speakers. English is an Indian language. If English is an American language, it is as much an Indian language. Same reasons.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
I mean, I think even within India, we cannot agree on what we call something like aloo batata or whatever you want to call it. So
Gardi or bheed. I mean, any Mumbaikars would know.
I think we're all from Mumbai, and it's just we have our own slang and language. So
Yeah.
the rest of India doesn't understand that. And I've like seen
Yeah.
that with my friends here who are from Delhi or North India or South India. So yeah.
Exactly.
I don't get so it. I don't really see the point of getting hung up on words. Language keeps evolving, food keeps evolving.
Yeah.
That's another
Yeah.
Okay,
reason
sir,
why.
this meeting's gonna end in like 10 minutes.
Okay.
So, conjuice things, we're gonna have
You just have
to.
to rejoin the same meeting, no issue.
Yeah, if
Yeah,
you
it's a
want,
recurring link.
Yeah, we can do
I
that.
have a like free account that goes until 40 minutes if you want that. So
Oh, wow.
Nice flex.
Flex.
Okay.
See that
um,
the privilege of being a
Yeah.
university staff, where the
employee, yeah.
university pays for everything.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
So
Okay.
I wish I had that university. I
Yeah.
hope my professor doesn't hear this.
Yep. All right. So what we are going to talk about now is essentially the kind of difference that could be possibly seen in the lifestyle of India versus Texas. So that is something that we would really like to talk about. So basically, in terms of, let's say, healthcare or I don't know, the education. So what would you say is the difference that you have seen?
Well, this is a very heavy question because
Yep.
I guess we are
Which it
here
is about.
because we wanted to have a higher education here. That's why we are here, and it's relatively good because at least in my field, I never had that research base in India, which is what's all about here. That you learn the application base of the principles, the concepts, and it's not just what we call in India is like ratifying or just trying to mug up things. So I was very new to that concept because I did medicine, and that's pretty much 95% memory and a lot of application. But yeah, it bases on memory. So that was new to me. I really enjoyed the parts where I got to learn more, and it was a very cultural exchange. Your professor or like even your peers and everybody allows you to exchange your ideas. If even if you're wrong, nobody's gonna tell you that, hey, this is stupid. Why are you saying this out loud? They'll correct you in a good way. They'll like have you do more like go out in the field and like use your concepts and knowledge. That's pretty cool for me. The other question is, it's very different, obviously, because cultural differences are huge here. Um, but since we all have that privilege of being from Bombay, so we are kind of used to that city living, which was the opposite here because we were in a very small town. I was not used to the religious part of it. It was like a big shock, at least location wise. I was not used to the slow life or things being so far apart. Everything was is walkable in India, but here you have to either have a car, especially in Texas, or you have to have some mode of transportation, which is again not a very common thing to have buses or trains and stuff. So that was a big challenge, but you kind of get around to it. You find your way. It's not tough to do that. As a woman, I would say it's way safer than India, at least in my experience. I can't say for everyone. At least in College Station, Texas, and Austin, Texas, where I live right now, it's way safer. I don't have to look over my shoulder, or I don't have to worry about going out at night by myself or taking an Uber by myself. So that's been pretty cool. I can wear whatever I want without people, judging or being weird or creepy about it. So that's a big plus for me.
Yeah, all the points Juhi said. Uh, Obviously, um, I was going to say a few things which she already said, but anyway, I'll try to add on to that. Um, so the first thing that I obviously noticed was that our exposure to the US is largely through movies or TV shows, and they are all based out of big cities, LA, New York, and the US is huge. It's insanely huge, and it's largely empty and rural, which we don't get to see a lot of. So if I go out right now, it'll be pitch black. There's no one on the street. It's completely empty. And you compare that to a place like Mumbai where you come from, and it's a stark contrast. So yeah, as you mentioned, it was a little difficult to get used to because we are surrounded by people in India wherever we go, and here it's just empty, and places close at like 9 p.m. here. Like restaurants close at 9 p.m., which is I Indians don't even start having dinner at that time.
Yeah,
So it was a bit difficult adjusting. People here sometimes have dinner at like 5. So it's
I do
strange.
that. So I've become American.
Not American, you become old. That's the point.
Don't. That's not it.
I Old Americans eat at 5. I was going to
Yeah, okay,
get to
I'll
that.
take that.
But yeah, also you notice a lot of uh, things that people here too. Like from a very young age, people are independent. College students here drive their own cars. They come from wherever they come from. Like a lot of people come from farms, and they've been working small jobs, odd jobs, even since they were like 16, and they start earning money and do their own stuff very early in life, and you know they're always looking to be independent, and that is very different in India. A lot of times, especially in like middle class families that we come from, your parents support you till a very you know much later in your life. Like people live with their parents all their life. So I mean, I knew about it, but it's very different to actually see it in person, and you see how people support themselves. And there is uh, this thing like dignity of labor that we hear of a lot in India, but we don't get to see a lot of. There's always some jobs are considered inferior in India. There's always this uh, feeling that is not here. Um, you know, pe- Jobs that would be called, say, blue collar, they also earn as much as anyone else, like a plumber or electrician, which would be, you know, a menial job in India, and they wouldn't make a lot of money. But here they charge a high amount, and they, live a decent middle class life. So a lot of things that we, don't associate with uh, upper class or middle class standards, those are pretty common here. So you can't look at a person and say what they actually do for a living, because they could be extremely rich, but their job could be uh, you know fixing pipes. So that's one of the differences that I've noticed here. And yeah, cab drivers, it was very different here, because there are a lot of jobs that in India are very male specific, like cab drivers, bartenders, waiters. Very rarely I've seen women do those jobs. But here it was strange when I got into a cab and the driver was female. Like there was a woman driving a cab, so that was interesting, and it's obviously great. I hope India can do that finally. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a part-time job on campus, which was like, in the dining hall, which it basically serving food. And that's one of the easiest job you can get as an outsider to start off. And because there's very competitive things when you go into like more research-based part-time jobs on campus. So that's where mostly a lot of international students start. And I did that, and I was like surprised, but also glad that I got to do it, because you learn way more to be way more respectful towards like people in the service industry. It's not easy to do that. It's very easy to like yell at a server or a waiter to for not doing things right or getting an order right, but when you see the other side of it, there are so many things that is like explains why something happens wrong or it's not their fault. And so I mean, people in India definitely need to do that some way, but since we have so much labor, it's difficult for people like us who are like, privileged in certain ways to go and do a job at McDonald's or a restaurant, which is very looked down upon kind of. So.
Yeah, I would totally agree to that. And it's really funny how dignity of labor is one of the key values they teach you as a child in India. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but or you had this, not because I'm just saying I'm including
Uh,
Shwangi into this.
no, we had it
Yeah,
in school. Yeah, we had it in
yeah,
value education.
I get it. Like,
Moral
okay,
yeah,
education.
yes.
just because I had ICSE education, it wasn't all that bad. Okay, they sometimes talked about values. Okay, so
Okay. Yeah, we had an value education class, and you would get like this entire textbook with different morally specific topics, and which they would suggest a person should know, and they should grow up to have those values in order to be a good citizen. And dignity of labor, I specifically remember this dignity of labor being one of them. And they would also have these. I remember this specifically because I was so puzzled about this entire concept, where they would have these ideas of very westernized idea actually of having teenagers work, like Juhi said, work in as, let's say, as the waiting staff. So for for a student growing up in India, and like for somebody who hasn't seen that, you just feel like, oh, this is child labor. Why is a 16-year-old working? What is going on? Although like the law, it's not what the law says, but like if you are 16, you are under 18, and that's, I was messed up. So that's the first thought that comes to you, like why are you going to make somebody do that? And yeah, even though that is one of the culturally accepted uh, values, it's one of the things that's really not acceptable in India. So it's really funny. I just find that really funny.
India is
Yeah.
built on the foundation of hypocrisy. So, like, does anything surprise us anymore?
We
Come
also
on.
we also learn that religious tolerance is one of the key values, and we see how that's going. So
Secularism and all of that things we learned, these are all just
We,
unicorn terms, honestly,
yeah,
but
we were
they just
made to recite
feels like
the
rainbow.
preamble.
oh yeah, how that's going we can all see. So
Oh,
Yeah.
Apparently,
yeah.
not all your brothers, all your Indians are your brothers and sisters. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends if they're circumcised or not. Okay. I think that's the ground rule.
yeah, nowadays yes,
sure.
always been actually. So
Anyway, I
That's
think,
the criteria.
yeah, what would you guys say is, um, lost my words. What would you say is the political difference that you would see? What is the difference you would
Yeah.
see in the political sphere specifically? And how does that play into normal societal living? Heavy questions.
I'll go first because
I mean, you guys have the great Ted Cruz, so like obviously you have great insights about political.
yes, I have
Uh,
strong opinions to voice. So in India was not very, interested in politics, even Indian politics or world politics. I knew about things on the internet, but I never really cared to learn about how things work. Or honestly, like I'm just outing myself, but I still couldn't tell you all the civics part of India because I hated that subject. So but ever since I've been here, we both came here in 2016, and that's when the whole world, like the whole of this country, went to shit. Is when Trump was elected in November, like a few months after we landed here. So that's when we saw this whole thing go down, where people like international students as well as citizens and Americans were just shocked that that person was elected as a president, and everybody just thought it was a joke this whole time, and everybody just like shattered the reality that anything could happen. And these past 4 years have been like, I mean, like the rest of the world has seen, been a shit show for this country. um, so yeah, and ever since then I've been following a lot of American politics and trying to understand more of world politics and how it affects like even India. And since we are both like international students, it affects us, like work visa or like our status in this country, and anything could change at any point, which was why I also was like biased into following the politics here. um, so I was like very excited about last year's election in the US. And since you speak of Ted Cruz, we've had this insane snowstorm, winter freezing in Texas this past week. And oh my God, the memes! I'm here for all the memes about Ted Cruz. But DK, would you like to add?
I used to have this very stupid joke, but I'm not gonna say it now.
Please do
Uh,
it.
okay, so no, so I used to say that when we came to the US, we saw that every state has its own like different natural disasters. Like Louisiana has these floods and hurricanes, California has wildfires, New York has blizzards, and Texas has Ted Cruz. So that's literally it.
Yeah.
That was my very stupid joke that it worked well on my podcast. But anyway,
Yes. The
point
I
is,
don't
timing
think I've
matters.
ever hated any Republican more than Ted Cruz. I don't think I even hate Donald
oh,
Trump
I
more
can.
than Ted
Oh,
Cruz.
you've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I'll give you a long list, but Ronald Reagan, Roy Moore, Donald Trump, obviously,
Mitch
uh,
McConnell.
Dick
I
Cheney,
think I think even
Mitch
worse than all of
McConnell.
these are Marco Rubio because he just keeps pretending that he's not one of them, but he really is. Like all
That's
of
so
his
many.
debates are
Rand Paul. Oh my, never
There's
mind.
yeah,
too many, too many.
yeah.
And not, we've not even started on George Bush and his
And
family.
that's even just like the American ones. Like if you
I love George
include
Bush.
Really?
Thank you
Why?
for saying because he's so dumb.
Oh,
He's just so
Uh,
he's
dumb.
not dumb. He's not dumb.
he's not
He's
done.
uh, he's a
He's
very
just
smart man. He's a very George W. Bush is actually a smart man. He pretended to be dumb so that people would have lower standards. He wanted so he's actually Ivy League educated, very rich guy, comes from a billionaire family. He is
yeah.
well off. Okay, he was always privileged.
mhm.
He tried to be this everyman Texas guy so he could relate to the working class.
I don't know.
A-
I love listening to Bushisms. That's
And
like my
oh,
go-to thing at night.
yeah, yeah. Oh, what was that? There's a saying in Tennessee, fool me once, y-
Shame on you,
shame
fool.
on you, or fool me.
Or the
Fool me
fish one,
twice,
fish
shame
Yeah,
and
on me.
human ought to coexist together. How could
I
you
don't know.
not remember that? I have all of these just
It's
memorized for
great for
absurd reasons.
Yeah,
entertainment
I
purposes,
mean,
but
Yeah.
he sounds
yeah,
like a
Mm,
goofy, funny old man, but
Yeah.
a lot of people in Middle East don't, you know,
think that.
Yeah,
yeah, don't find it
he
funny.
has ruined Middle East probably more than what Trump did with Iran. Like he's just ruined it so much. And you're right, I guess. He seems dumb, but he is a very strategic man who's destroyed this entire region very
Yeah,
strategically.
but anyway, so here politics is obviously very different in the US, uh, because I think a lot of it comes down to the two-party system. So there's only one of two choices that you have. It's not
Yeah.
like India where you have so many parties and you can pick and choose ideologies or people you like. So there are regional parties, local language-based parties, caste-based parties, everything that
Religion-based
yeah.
parties, apparently.
So
not on
sorry,
paper,
the
so not.
but the US is like either you are this or that, either you're Democrat or Republican. That's the only choice you have. And even among Republicans, so people choose Republicans because a lot of people are single issue voters. So single issues like abortion, for
Mm,
example. If you are against abortion, then we will vote for you. That is the
mm,
only issue people care about. And Republicans have literally
mm,
swooped that issue completely. And there are a lot of people who are religious and who go for that, or people who care about guns, Second Amendment, and they would say that we don't want any gun restrictions, any gun laws, uh, and whoever politician agrees with that, we'll go with that party or politician. So
mm,
a lot of it is just a binary, and you have to choose, and you will see that because you've made that choice, because you have because of one issue you have decided to go with that party. Now you have to justify everything that party does, and it becomes very you know stupid. Like there's no explanation for it. There are people who are justifying things like putting immigrants in kids in cages because they have already declared support for the party that did that, so they have no other option but to just go with it and justify whatever is happening. So it's strange, but also what Juhi mentioned, we had the privilege in India to not be political, but here we don't have the option. Here you are suddenly a minority, and here your rights depend on who is in power.
mm,
So a lot of things that
mm,
minorities do experience in India as well.
mm.
When you are privileged, you can afford to not be political, but
Yeah.
when uh, say you are a minority, you do care that the majority looks after you, and that is something that happens when a lot of people move from India to the US. People who would have probably voted for uh, BJP or Modi in India would not vote for Trump here. That's because it's just makes sense in a very convoluted way where even though
Oh,
they
that's
stand for the
interesting. Yeah.
same ideologies in their countries, they affect the same people differently when you are in different places. So
Hmm.
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, that sorry, that makes a lot of sense because that is something that Shivangi and I have spoken about in detail as well when we were doing our episode on being apolitical, and we actually spoke in length. We're not very proud of the episode, but we spoke in length about how being apolitical actually comes as a privilege. Because there's something that we both usually say about being apolitical is that the only reason you would, it's a joke actually, the only reason we follow politics is because it's so funny. But yeah, but the other thing is also that you really need to follow it because it really affects you somewhere down the line in a country where your ruling party is going to actually make sure whether you get your rights or not. It's quite essential that you do know who you are voting for. And it's really funny how you say that. I mean, I'm using the word funny a lot now, but the contrast that you show between people who would vote for Modi and people who would vote for Trump, because as seen earlier, they're pretty similar to say the least. Um, yeah, and
I think he
as
meant more like not having issue, but I would also,
hmm,
I was under the assumption that people who like Modi automatically like Trump. Like
same, I
there's a
agree to that.
association between that, and I mean I got that from this one or like two memes I saw of people like actually losing their entire mind when Biden got elected, saying that nahi, Modi lost his bhai and all of that.
Yeah.
And that was what I got from like seeing that. So I assumed like since they're both right wings and uh, they don't have the same issues, but uh, I think there is some sort of correlation between that
Hmm,
and what I got on the
hmm,
internet. So,
Yeah, so that's because, it's easy for people in India to go and support Trump because they are not being affected directly
hmm.
by the policies that he passed here. But we've also discussed this earlier where a lot of Indians who grow up here are privileged in a way that they can be Republican
hmm,
just because they come from a more wealthy status, like their parents are first generation here, and
hmm,
then they are born here. Like we've talked about who Nikki Haley and who else is like Ajit Pai or Bobby Jindal. All these people are more Republican based because they come from that economic background, which is, being a Republican makes sense for them. And a lot of Indians who also do like settle here eventually are likely to be Republicans because they don't really care about women's rights or guns or those kind of things. So they are like neither way. It's just about money for them.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense honestly because if you look at that makes sense that they're not affected by it, and that's why they can. Because I've heard this excuse a lot about rationalizing Trump's actions, saying that he's doing what's best for America. But if America is built on the land of immigrants, then you're not doing the best that there is, since you're just literally ruining the spirit of America. But that's a whole discussion about Trump that we can get into, and it's really not the best time to get into Republican hate because there's already so much enormity for Ted. So I think this ties into like the comparison between India and US that you've made actually ties into what I wanted to ask next about your life here and how do people from India, maybe you know them or maybe somebody told them about you living in abroad. So what is the kind of response you get from people who are back home in India to do they find you different after you come back? Do they find you similar? And And obviously, do they outright say that you have a privilege associated with going abroad? And what are your thoughts on the privilege people have in going abroad? Lot of questions right after the other. So if you guys forget, I can just back you up. No worries.
Okay, I'll start from the end. Okay, so the last question you asked, yeah, there is a privilege associated with going abroad. Uh, because okay, first of all, we're having this conversation in English. Back, I don't know what the stats are or how many people are enrolled in vernacular medium schools these days, but when I was a kid, almost all my friends were in like Marathi or Gujarati medium schools back in, where I lived. Somehow my parents had the foresight to put me in an English medium school, and again, that is a privilege. Uh, a lot of people, when I went to college, came from smaller towns and they were not very good speaking English. So that is something that uh, might seem very normal to us because since we were kids, we've always learned everything in English. And so before you come here, you have to pass the GRE or TOEFL, and those are not easy exams. Even if you're a first, if your first language is English, doing that when you're not just that your second language is English, also that your schooling and education was not in that language. So that is something that I've noticed that a lot of times that is a barrier to entry to a lot of people who want to come here. Also, it's not cheap. Education here obviously is expensive. You have to show that you have certain funds or backing, or you have to be so good that you have a scholarship or something. And even if you do have some sort of scholarship that will cover your tuition, you still have to live here. Living here is again not cheap, and you have to have some sort of financial backing that goes with it. um, India is not a very rich country. There are a lot of people who can afford it, uh, but again, us being from middle class background, that is a privilege that we have to acknowledge at every point. um, so yeah, there is a lot of privilege associated with having the option, just the option to come abroad and to actually successfully do it. We have to acknowledge that we were in a lot of ways privileged to be able to do it. So yeah, I hope that answers the last part of your question. But coming back to your first part, where have there been any changes in the way I am or the way I behave? I can't speak for myself. I'm pretty sure there is. I'm pretty sure my accent did not sound like this when I came here. I'm pretty sure that there, when I came, I just went back to India and uh, I couldn't like get the traffic uh, because I'm like I just drove to Houston and back, uh, and took me like 2 hours. Um, it's like 90 miles. Again, another thing that the units of conversion become miles and Fahrenheit that I've been using these days here. I've been talking about like, oh, it was 60 degrees here. Again, minor cultural differences that you have to pick up. But those are the only changes that I can notice myself. I don't know if my friends, relatives who met me, they noticed any difference. I'm sure they would have, but they're too polite to say it to my face.
Yeah, I would like answer the first part first and say that I definitely know that my family things have changed in a lot of ways. I can also see a lot of changes. It is like positive or negative either way. I think negative would be just that the accent that I use, it comes off as a little pretentious, but it just like, I don't know, my brain just does that when I'm speaking to somebody who's American. It just starts mimicking the sound, so that's like out of my control. And those are the like the minor things, but my family definitely things have changed. Like I also think that I've become more open-minded. In India I was not as much, because I didn't really have the resources or the right or the different kind of people or like more cultural differences, or meeting people from a lot of different countries. All that has like changed my mindset and thoughts a lot, and opinions on a lot of things. I never really cared for, like I said, politics or like a lot of other things, because like DK said, we were a majority in India, so I didn't really have to make the effort. But here I've like become more political, more about like thinking about more about women's rights and what's wrong, what's right, like racism, all that stuff. So that also reflects in the way I talk to people in India now, because I mean, I know, like, we've probably all know at this point that there's a lot of casteism, and like people, communities making fun of each other, and it's more like outright, like people just take it as a joke, but it's not really like that. So all that has changed. Like, I think before I would have like joked something which was like funny, but not really to that other person. I've become more conscious about these things. My family, my mom definitely says, like, she talks like in your country, even though I'm from India. She's like, in your country, or things that happen in your country. I'm like, I'm not American, mom, but that's how things are now. The second question, I forgot what was the second part of the question.
Yeah, even I forgot. Hold on. Literally forgot for the second. Oh, yeah. The second part was, what are your thoughts on the fact that there is a privilege associated with going abroad? So DK, answer that
Yeah.
first.
Yeah, so that definitely is a privilege. Like, even to think that I had the chance to go abroad is like a privilege. Having the education beforehand also helps, because we are like, not like universities here is not going to accept you as a student unless you have certain education or certain background and those kind of skills. um, Other than that, I would say it's also a privilege to know English. I know a lot of international students who don't speak English, and it's their like second language, or they really had to learn. Like, specifically, I've had friends from China who they don't really get that English education, so they've struggled trying to understand classes here or trying to speak to their professors. And like, the fun side of privilege, I would say, is helps to have some kind of American cultural knowledge. It becomes easier to fit in with people here. And I can say that not everybody is interested in watching American TV shows and movies, and I think we've done that, so it just becomes easier to get those references and communicate with people.
Right. Um, that was very enriching, to say the least.
Yeah.
A lot. When you talk about, before we move on, when you talk about not wanting to watch, or like just it not being your interest to watch American television, or I mean, of course, with the expansion in media right now, as being media students, I keep bringing back the reference. But with the expansion in media right now, it is accessible. But maybe, as far as I understand, few years ago, it wasn't as well. So doesn't that, as you mentioned, like speaking English comes as a privilege, knowing English beforehand comes as a privilege. Would you say that that as well, not having any idea about what American society is going to be like, or how you would be settling in, uh, would you say that that comes as a privilege as well? And how did you deal with that when you took up the decision to actually shift?
Okay,
Is that
I don't particularly understand. Okay, let me
Yeah.
try to understand the question. So, if I understand correctly, what you're asking is, uh, did we know beforehand how American society would be like, and did that help? Is that your question?
somewhat, yeah.
Um,
Should I rephrase
no, it's
it?
like
That makes more sense, because I
I'm
went
pretty
all
sure
over the
Juhi
place.
answered that before only in her
Yeah,
answer.
but what would you say is the staunch difference in taking up the decision now, well as when you did it, and how has it impacted you?
I mean, I think if I understand your question right, it's we've been here like just over 4 years, so it's not that stark of a difference of somebody who came in 2020 or 2021 and us in 2016. I think people who watch like American shows, it's a huge population now. People are trying to keep up with trends because of internet. Um, but I can say that some people might not be interested in watching those, or their families might not allow like watching because some things are not, appropriate in Indian terms to watch. Like Friends, they have a lot of inappropriate scenes, which I think even when I used to watch it, my parents were like, "What the hell are you watching?" as a kid. Those things are there, but I don't really know if it like I can't answer for people who've not watched it because I don't know what they've gone through. But I can say that during conversations when people talk about Friends or The Office and these type of TV shows, it just comes easier to understand references, make a connection with people. Even at workplace, it's been easier for me. Like, for example, if you are in America for a while and people here talk about American football, that's when I get lost a little bit because I don't follow American football. So it becomes tougher to connect with people. I guess those are the only cultural differences I would say. Like, yeah.
No one,
Yeah,
no
also,
young people talk about Friends. Okay, Friends is an old show. If anyone talks about Friends, they're 30 years old.
if
Okay.
anybody thinks Friends is funny, that's just a weird
No, yeah,
Yeah,
personality.
it
if
is,
Yeah.
but I would say it's
young,
way more common for Indian students to talk about Friends, and that's what
Yeah.
I would say because that's one of the first shows that people start
I
watching.
say, yeah, I think it's more popular in India than it was in the
Yeah.
US at this point.
Yeah, because
The
Yeah,
it
young
runs
Very
free
people
true.
all
here
day long.
are lost when if you
no,
make
it's like
Friends reference.
even within Indian students, they just connect when people have watched Friends or like, but now it's
Yeah.
like changing, the dynamic is changing towards The Office or like other TV shows, which, yeah.
Yeah, that
So
this
I
knowledge.
wanted to ask
Sorry.
Um,
about. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Deepak, sorry.
No, no, this knowledge is coming from dating apps and reading people's bios, and you see office references. Everyone is
Yeah.
like some office. I
That's
haven't watched
that's
it.
a whole
I
another episode I could do.
Yep.
yeah.
That's a whole other arena that people in my age are also doing. So there are more office references than Friends. But since we're talking about pop culture and American pop culture, I just wanted to know, there is a certain, like idea of America that these American prominent pop culture shows present. So do you think they glorify the entire experience of living in America? Because of course drama, so they're supposed to do that. Or do you think some of these shows have addressed something like very realistic aspects of living in America? Or do you think it was very different from when you came to America? And since you're from Texas, so there has to be better experiences of what you thought America was and what it turned out to be.
I can talk at length. DK, would you want to go first? Or?
I'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so Breaking Bad, that is America. That will
Yeah.
not happen anywhere else because nowhere in the world is healthcare that expensive.
God.
US is insane
Yeah,
with healthcare costs. So yeah, it's not all glorification. It's horrible that someone has to sell meth to, pay for their medical bills. But anyway, I think every country would do that. They would try to show uh, it as a good life, but obviously not. You can't expect that fiction translates completely into reality. So it depends what show you're watching. I don't remember any show based out of Texas. Is there any show that is based out of Texas?
um,
I
um,
honestly don't know.
Young Sheldon.
that,
That's the one I remember on top of
Oh
my
yeah,
head.
Sheldon is supposed to
Yeah,
be from
Oh
Texas.
yeah,
from
okay, yeah,
Texas. Yeah, big.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
even
Big Bang Theory.
not even this another show. It's not Texas. It's Chicago actually. But Shameless is also kind of portrays a very. Have you all heard of Shameless?
No.
Or is
Yeah,
that just
I
a
haven't watched it though.
I
Yeah,
watched a
so
little bit, and I have an American friend who grew up like that, and she's like, yeah,
yeah.
this is very relatable. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's more of like, Americans relating to their own TV shows rather than international people. For us, it's mostly, I think people usually watch sitcoms and start with sitcoms, and then
Yeah.
now they've moved on to more like dramatic. Or then there's always those fantasy shows, which obviously there is no reality to it. But
Yeah.
never have I
Hmm.
ever had these many friends who were free on a Wednesday afternoon having coffee. Everybody has their own life here.
Amazing.
So
I
that's
think
Yeah.
what I
that's
would say. And again, if you want to go more recent, or I guess The Office, my workplace is nothing like that. It would be like the moment one person made one slight inappropriate joke, the HR would have them fired so fast. It would
Yeah.
not be. It would not be funny.
hmm.
So it
Exactly the
is.
way they should. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it is none
well,
of this is like that. Nobody is wasting time doing pranks or, on their office employee. Everybody is being productive. They are getting paid to work and not have these many like 50 parties in an office. So, other than what I would say is just that DK and I joke about, that's what she said all the time. That's the only thing that's relatable. Other than that,
Not at our workplace. We joke
yeah,
at it on
not at
personal
a
time.
workplace, obviously, but this is outside. And even if you go on to TV shows or like things where they involve a university life or movies, it is nothing like that. Nobody is sitting on the grass talking to their friends the entire time or having these crazy parties. It's like people are more responsible than you see. It's obviously for dramatic and more comedic effects. But yeah, I think we've discussed it before on our podcast, but it's not that everybody here is just looking prim proper, wearing suits and heels and like Sex and the City. Nobody, like, I would love to know who in New York is getting paid to live in a like posh apartment complex for writing a 800 word column once in a while, like Carrie
also, how
does.
are these
So
columnists so rich, Matlab? They're just all buying all of these luxury items when the
yeah.
job that pays the least is journalism. So they're just buying all of these like expensive items.
Yeah.
They just,
It's
yeah,
not
that's
it's not
another.
realistic in any way. It's just
Yeah, I mean
the idea.
those are just uh tropes, basic
Yeah.
tropes that
Yeah, tropes. Yeah.
everyone uses. And okay, college life, I don't know if we can speak about it a lot because as grad students we have a very different life. Um, some undergrads, I'm pretty sure, do a lot of partying and frat houses and sororities. They have a lot of fun, but it's obviously nothing close to like what you would see in a
Hmm.
teen comedy or something like that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I have like anytime I watch these teen movies, I now relate to the parents more. So,
Yep.
Same.
Yep.
Same.
so I
Oh
should
my
not be seeking.
I'm
It's
19 and I
also
relate to the parents, which is so weird.
Yeah.
don't date so fast, but it's also that like the frat house and sorority stuff. It also comes from that privileged American part of it. It's not that every American is like that, even in undergrad, because a lot of them are trying to put themselves through school and working 3 or 4 part-time jobs, so nobody has the time to do. People do have like I would say, like we've had like house parties that have been insane, but it's not usual to happen so often.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes
Makes a lot of
sense.
sense.
Yep.
Also, just to break it to you, we don't say, it's going to sound pretty rude, but we don't say that's what she said anymore. We say title of your sex tape. So just putting it out
Yep.
there.
Okay.
Just
I know Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I get all the
yep.
I don't know.
references, but it's
That
okay.
was
We
Great.
are
very
old.
old. That is
We
very
are
old. Like,
old,
title of a sex tape is okay. Fine, never mind.
but
You
it's
should do
been
this.
become more common through
Yeah.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But we
No, okay.
are old, so we get a pass.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Cool.
Okay.
That's a new one I've heard. Yes. So let's just tie this entire episode up by saying, if given the chance, would you want to settle back into your home country or would you want to stay in America?
I don't have any preference, honestly. Uh, so here are my requirements for the place I live in. It should have a good climate. It should not be too cold. uh, People should speak English because I can communicate in English. I don't want to learn another language. And there is freedom. Like I should not be prosecuted for what I say. Like, so
Good luck.
Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
live in India.
You can't come to India.
Just settle in. Yeah, just live
So
there.
these are my
Having a
requirements.
socially.
If a country can meet all these requirements, I am happy to settle there, and they give me the passport too.
What about Sweden? I heard it's pretty chill there.
Very cold. First requirement
Yeah,
is
quite
violated.
literally very chill. Yeah.
And
That
then
I've
you would
seen.
have to learn, the language.
Swedish.
They have pretty good English speakers. I
Yeah,
mean,
they speak
PewDiePie is
English a
good
lot.
enough as it is. So he was a native Swedish speaker. So, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
But yeah,
whatever you say has to have consequences, right? Depends on what you say.
yeah. I mean,
I mean, with with
Yeah, with
reasonable restriction.
reasonable. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to hate speech or
there you
threaten
go.
someone.
So,
Yeah, I'm
but yeah,
obviously
India
not
is
going there.
not where. Yeah, India is not where you would be allowed to, the way you
Yeah.
speak.
I mean,
Yeah, probably not.
I mean,
sure.
making this entire podcast is only such a entire terror
Yeah, I
thing
would
that
not dare to make a podcast. The things we say, I would not do that anymore.
Yeah, I love the
yeah.
First Amendment here. I can say anything, and no one
You
can
could
arrest me.
still face the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, but I won't get arrested for saying anything on the podcast.
This is also my job in the
Yeah.
future. So I'm doing great right now. Amazing life I have ahead of me, getting
Shivangi
prosecuted
has
left and right.
no filter considering the job she wants. She has zero filter when it comes to bashing the government, left, right, and center.
I can't even I can't even sugarcoat things. Like I just cannot do that either. So I have a great future ahead of me. So it's an amazing
Good luck.
job right
Avoid morning walks.
Hmm.
now. Where I
It's quite
come from,
necessary for
actually,
her to
you
have a
can.
morning walk.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I also have, cool. Okay, yeah, I understood what you
Don't
said.
overshare, please.
Well, to answer your question, I would say that I would like to live in US. I don't see myself going like settling back in India unless I had to. That's fine. I would like to go back eventually, but like years after I've like done everything I want to do, because I genuinely prefer the work culture here and the opportunities here so far. Or it could be like any other country like Canada or Europe or whatever. Wherever there's like the work I like is there, I'll go for it. So
That sounds great. Yeah. Just if you want your freedom of speech, just don't come to India. It's not
Yeah,
going to work.
that's
I mean,
that's
for
what I thought.
women's freedom, I would not come to India either. So.
Women's freedom, pollution, freedom of speech, of course, as mentioned earlier, and political, having political choice, and yeah, it's a long list. Let's not get into that. Yeah.
And Texas is usually nice for the first. I mean, used to be.
Yeah.
The weather last week just
Yeah, the
went too
last
great.
week, guys, I'm very, very glad to leave Texas soon. So
Yeah, so far it has been good, but last week just kind of disappointed us.
Yeah.
But yeah, the only problem with the US is healthcare. I don't
yeah,
know.
that's the one thing that I absolutely hate. So I'll try my best to try to find a way around it.
Yeah, we got to adjust somewhere, everywhere. So now that is that, we would like you to tell our viewers and listeners where they can find Veg and Non Veg.
Yeah, you can find us on a lot of different platforms on Spotify, Stitcher, Anchor, Apple Podcast, and even on our website, which is vegandnonveg.com, which is veganonveg.com. And we are on different social media platforms as well, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And I hope Privilege puts our links in the description so that way people can find us easily. And thank you for having us on your podcast this week.
Thanks a lot for agreeing to collab with us. This was a very, very enriching experience. And I hope that our viewers, I hope that our listeners, you all have loved this collaboration as well. So do share your love in the comments for videos. And I don't know how our listeners are going to contact us. We are available on LinkedIn and Instagram, as mentioned earlier.
Thank you for listening to Privilege Check Podcast. If you like this episode, then please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. We're also available on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Please do follow us on Instagram. That is at Privilege Check. That's PRIVILEGECHK. Here's to an enlightened life.